Okay, everyone, if I could get your attention, thank you for your patience here tonight. My name is Robert Jadon, and I'm the co-founder of the Startup UCLA program. And first off, we'd like to thank a couple of our sponsors, Lightspeed Ventures, who's based up north, as well as Manat, who's a law firm down here with Manat Digital that's also a group that works with the digital companies here in LA and across the country. Tonight, we're really happy to have an alum back on campus, Brian Lee. Currently, he is the CEO and founder of The Honest Company, and we're going to talk to him a little bit about his experience as an entrepreneur and then open it up to the group. So with that, I'll have Brian come up here. All right. Okay, well, great. Well, thanks so much for coming back to campus and
thank you.
Supporting Startup UCLA. So you know, usually instead of going through a big background and me trying to summarize what you've done, I just turn it over to you, and maybe you can give everyone who are not familiar with you, you know, a little bit about your story, and we can start with that.
Great. So how far back should I go? 'Cause I'm definitely the oldest guy in the room right now. Let's see, I grew up in Orange County, originally born in South Korea. My parents immigrated to the States. We moved to Orange County. So I grew up there and then came to UCLA for undergrad and then stayed for law school, and I've been in LA ever since. So basically after law school, I became a lawyer. And I was the worst lawyer ever, by the way. It's like, seriously, if you talk to any of my old partners that I worked for, they'll tell you I was like the worst lawyer. But I worked at a firm called Jadon in downtown LA. And I did that for like a year or two, almost 2 years. And during that time, I would meet with my best friend at the time. His name was Brian also, Brian Liu. And we would meet across the street from the law firm every day. And we're like, okay, there's got to be something better than this, because he was working at another law firm, and we're like, we got to get out of this gig. And we, at the time, this is 1999, and the internet was really starting to kind of heat up, of course. And we're like, let's just do something online. Let's do something legal online. And that's kind of the genesis of my first company. It was called LegalZoom.com. And we started that, gosh, almost 15 years ago now. Time really flies, seriously. So I started that and then stayed there, worked on that for about 8 or 9 years, and then kind of got the bug to start something new again. So I launched a second company called ShoeDazzle.com, which was really one of the first kind of online subscription e-commerce businesses. And then just 2.5 years ago, I launched my third company called The Honest Company, which is honest.com.
Oh, yeah. So now I know, you know, since I know some of the background here. So when you were younger, though, when you were first starting out, you were always sort of an entrepreneur, like even at a very young age. And sort of, do you think that was just always in your blood, and you sort of got sidetracked with the legal route, or I mean?
I think so. I think I went to law school. I never wanted to be a lawyer. That was never my dream to, like, you know, be a lawyer. It was my mom's dream, but it wasn't my dream. So, I mean, I think most entrepreneurs and most of you here tonight kind of know that that's the path you want to take. You know, that you want to go start something, you want to make your mark, you want to do something better or different or change the world, right? And I think most of us are just born with it. I remember starting my businesses at the earliest of ages, like when I was, gosh, I remember like in 2nd or 3rd grade, I used to create, you know, remember those, the graph paper? I used to like make mazes out of them and sell them for like a nickel to other students. I went, hey James, how are you, man? What are you doing here? Sorry, undergrad friend. And then, let's see, in like 4th grade, I'll tell the Halloween story.
Yeah, go for it.
I was always like the first kid in the neighborhood to go trick-or-treating, right, on Halloween. Like, I would be out there when people didn't even have their pumpkins out. I'd be like, like, you know, trick-or-treat. But I would like map out my entire route, and I would take a pillow sack with me, and I'd fill this thing up by the end of the night. And I get home, I dump it in my room, and I would count out 4 candies to a Ziploc bag. And I would sell them at school the next day for 25 cents. And I remember my dad was an entrepreneur. My dad started his own business when he came to the States. And you know, he was actually very encouraging, and he asked me like, hey, what are you doing? And I told him, and he thought it was great. And he sat down with me and filled up all these Ziploc bags with me. And it was just a great feeling actually making, for some reason, I always wanted to make money, right? I was like, I would collect all those quarters and I would go buy something. I'd probably buy like Star Wars cards or something like that.
Right.
But yeah, so I think it was just kind of in my nature to start a business.
So you kind of hit that point after being an attorney and kind of running through that grinder for a couple of years and deciding, okay, I want to go ahead and get this thing started. And you know, in some ways, it's like that seems like that obviously informed, you know, the sector you went after and probably the use case and that side of things. And so, you know, maybe you can talk about that idea of the genesis, because I know a lot of people in the audience sort of, you know, they really want to do something in entrepreneurship, but they don't know exactly what that idea is. And maybe you can talk about how that came about.
Well, LegalZoom was pretty easy because you know, I was doing law. The idea really came around when a partner asked me to form a corporation for a client. And it took me like 10 minutes to form this corporation because it's a one-page form. And then when I had to approve my hours, I saw $2,500 as the fee, right? And I actually went to him, I said, you know, it only took me 10 minutes, so it should be like, you know, 0.1 times my hourly rate. And he's like, no, that's our standard fee for incorporating clients. And right then, honestly, I was like, there's good margins in law, right? And I was like, we got to do something about this. So that was kind of like the genesis of LegalZoom. But shoot, I guess a lot of people would look at my career and be like, well, he's an e-commerce guy, yes, but I mean, he's selling divorces and wills and incorporations, and then he's selling women's shoes, and then he's selling baby products, right? But for me, it all kind of makes sense because it was just that time of my life, if you will. So ShoeDazzle really started with my wife, who loves shoes. She loves shoes more than most women love shoes. I mean, she really, really loves shoes. And she would buy these shoes, and she'd come home, and I actually saw the price tag of one of these pairs of shoes. I was shocked. I was like, I just couldn't believe anyone would pay that much for shoes. And I had a friend in the shoe business who told me that, you know, like what the cost of these shoes were. And I was like, wow, those are good margins, right? That's when we kind of dreamed up the ShoeDazzle idea together, really. We kind of, it's really fascinating. And I hope all of you experience this, is when you come up with an idea and it's just an idea, you know, and I remember like ShoeDazzle, we would talk about it at night after, you know, right before we were going to bed, and we would just talk about, you know, the model and the idea and where we would get the shoes and this and that. And to see it go from that point to, you know, where it got to, it's just, it's amazing. It's an amazing feeling. It's an amazing experience to see something grow. So that was ShoeDazzle. And then the Honest Company really came around because I had our first 2 children. And the Honest Company is kind of a special one for me, because I really do feel like we are making a difference. It's kind of a long story.
Yeah, go for it, yeah. Sure.
So the Honest Company, I'm not sure if you guys have seen it or not. It's pretty new. But it's an idea that Jessica Alba came up with, and she approached me like 6 years ago to help her with it. And at the time I was running ShoeDazzle, and I actually told her I didn't have time to do this with her. I'm friends with her husband, Cash, Warren. We kind of go way back. I used to hang out with him a lot. I knew Cash before he even started dating Jessica, and we saw him in People magazine. We're like, how the hell did you get Jessica? So we were basically, he called me up actually about 3 years ago, and he said, hey Brian, can you come over to the house? I really got to talk to you. I'm like, yeah, sure. So I went over there. He's like, remember that idea Jessica had? I'm like, yeah. She says, she's still working on it, right? And I go, really? Well, that's fascinating. She's so passionate about this organic, you know, baby category. And then he's like, yeah, and she's spending all our money, right? And then he shows me like all these decks from consultants that she hired, and, you know, business consultants to, you know, graphic design consultants. So this whole thing, I was like, okay, that's crazy. But then what happened was that she sat down with me, and Christopher Gavigan, who she was working with as a consultant, they sat me down and they showed me the usage of petrochemicals in baby products, right, over time. And really the usage of chemicals in these products really started ramping around the late 60s, early 70s. That's when like the petrochemical revolution kind of happened in the United States. And the usage of these chemicals kind of goes up like a hockey stick over time. And then they showed me this chart of, childhood diseases over that same period. Tourette's and autism and chronic allergies and asthmas and learning disabilities, cancers. And these diseases were almost directly correlated to the usage of these chemicals. And these chemicals are in food, they're in baby products, they're in the clothing, they're in your home environment. And it kind of freaked me out a little bit because, especially because I had a child then and he was just starting preschool, and they told us that he couldn't bring a peanut butter jelly sandwich to school because of all the kids with chronic nut allergies, right? And I was like, okay, so what have we done? Like my generation, not necessarily you, because you're kind of on the newer generation, but my generation and the generation ahead of me, I just look at it and I just think we've kind of screwed things up. It's like, and no one's taking responsibility, and no one was out there trying to fix this. Like in the United States, there are only 8 chemicals that are banned in baby products. Like asbestos isn't even one of these products. You could use asbestos in a baby bottle and it's fine. In the UK, there are over 1,200 chemicals that are banned because they do a lot of protection around chemicals in the EU. It's just that there's so much lobby power here in the United States. Like these giant CPG companies, the Procter, I shouldn't say that now. This is being retired. So some of the larger companies out there, it truly is about bottom line profits.
Yeah.
And they showed me this one baby shampoo from the US, and then this other baby shampoo, the same shampoo from the UK, and they're 2 completely different products. Right? And it just kind of almost like, it just pissed me off almost. I was like, well, that's a US company, but they don't care about US kids. And the problem is that not enough research has been done. That's number one. It's like no one could say, if a woman ingests this chemical during pregnancy, you have a 10 times higher likelihood of having a child with this problem, right? This is not enough research has been done. So the entire approach for the Honest Company was, if we knew that childhood diseases were pretty flat on a population ratio basis up until about 1970, why don't we just make a product that's natural, organic, and would have existed prior to that? And that was the kind of start of the Honest Company. And we've grown pretty nicely in the 2.5 years, and I'm really happy that there are just so many mothers and fathers out there that see the world the same way we see it, right? That do want to make that change, that want to make a difference, that want to be part of creating a healthier environment for their homes and for their families.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny is that I think it's really refreshing that you guys took that spin on it, and I feel like in a lot of ways, we hear about a lot of different web and internet companies that try to have a noble mission when they really don't. They try to turn like a normal thing into, oh yeah, well, we'd like to have that double bottom line angle, and I think it's nice when we have such a prominent company in the LA ecosystem that I think a lot of people are sort of watching to be one of those real breakout huge ones that also happens to incorporate that, So now one interesting thing about, that aspect, and, I don't mean to bring it to the past a little bit, but obviously you had the connection with Cash and Jessica. But when you were first starting out with LegalZoom, you weren't as a known quantity the way you are now. And so, maybe you can talk about how you were able to, sort of get Robert Shapiro involved, and how that story played out.
Yeah, so back when we started LegalZoom, or came up with the idea, the internet, believe it or not, was still relatively new, and the biggest issue people had was providing really confidential private information online. And with LegalZoom, we were asking for like your bank account information, your children's names, and all the kind of legal requirements that we needed, information that we needed to make your legal document. So we knew that the number one thing that people would be hesitant about would be trusting the site. And so we thought, okay, well, let's get someone who everyone knows, and at least that way, they'll know it's not some fly-by-night business, and they can at least trust it. They might not like the lawyer, but they know it's a real lawyer. And so, to your point, we didn't know anyone. Our networks were pretty small, and so I called around to everyone I knew, and I asked if they knew Robert Shapiro. He was the #1 person on our list because the OJ trial was just ending. Everyone in the world knew him, but no one I knew him, right? And so what I did was I called information one night. This is before Google, right? So I called 411, right? And I asked for Robert Shapiro, attorney, Century City. And they gave me a phone number, and this is like 10 o'clock at night, and I had my voice message written out, and he picked up the phone, right? And he said, "Hi, how can I help you?" I said, "I'm calling for Robert Shapiro," and he says, "This is Robert Shapiro, how can I help you?" I'm Robert Shapiro, the attorney? And he's like, "Yeah, this is Robert Shapiro, the attorney." And I said, "Well, I have a business idea I'd like to run by you." And the first thing he said was, "I'm not interested." Right? And he was just about to hang up. I could tell he was just about to hang up. And I just yelled, "Wait," right? And he says, well, I think I startled him, but he said, "What's going on?" Right? I go, "Well, how do you know you're not interested if you don't hear me out?" Right? And then after that, he said, I still remember, he said, "You've got 30 seconds. Right? You got 30 seconds. And in those 30 seconds, I told him the entire idea for LegalZoom. And at the end of it, maybe it was more like 45 seconds, but he actually said, "I hear ideas all the time, but I actually really like this one. And so call back tomorrow at a regular time and set up a lunch appointment." And that's how LegalZoom started.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, I think it just shows the power of, sometimes you can actually just make those, if you don't reach out, you're not going to actually, get a result, and so a lot of times we always kind of joke about that thing around here is, if you don't ask, you won't get it kind of thing. So, I guess now maybe it's a LinkedIn in-mail or who knows what it is now, but I think that's such a great story. You've been really great at being able to figure out customer acquisition and sort of modeling those channels over time. When you look at companies now and you're evaluating, let's say as an angel investor, is that sort of one of the primary things you want to have answered is like how they're, getting customers into their site?
Yeah, it is and it isn't. I think that the primary thing for any company is to focus on the product, whether that be a platform or, whether it be a server company like the one we just met, or whether it be, selling, goods from around the world or whatever. It's just the #1 thing is make sure you got, product that you're proud of, that you think is best in the marketplace, right? And that's #1, right? And then comes the customer acquisition angle. So my focus whenever I invest in a startup is show me the product, right? Show me the service, or show me what it is that you're trying to sell, and comparing that to what's out in the marketplace first, and then trying to drive down and see how they're going to get customer acquisition.
And now, you've heard a few of the pitches, from some of the startup UCLA companies, and some of them are not starting out with the same amount of resources that you started off with honest companies. So, how do you, what advice would you give to someone who's sort of starting an e-commerce company right now and wants to get going, but is starting small?
I love Scrappy. LegalZoom, we never got funding for LegalZoom. We started it with a loan from my parents and from my partner's parents of $50,000, which is a lot of money, but it wasn't, some gigantic number. And we started with $50,000, and we started the company out of my condo, and we just kept building it. And we'll put it this way, it's like, as when you start your first company and that company is successful, then it's a lot easier to raise money the second time, and especially the third time. But that first company, it's tough. It's really hard to raise capital. And so I always tell everyone or anyone I invest in is to treat that capital like it's the last capital you're ever going to see, right? And just try to drive down every single cost. We didn't take salaries ourselves for like almost 2 years, and it was hard. Eating top ramen and peanut butter jelly sandwiches every day, it's not easy. You give up a lot. working as a lawyer at Skadden, I was used to going out to nice dinners and going to a movie whenever I wanted or whatever, and that just stops, right? I mean, at some point, it's your friends start wondering if you're still alive because you never want to go out because you don't have any money. So basically, it's just cut every cost you can, be really scrappy, use your equity wisely, and judiciously, and hire, especially the early team. I mean, they gotta really believe in the idea as much as you, because it's gonna be hard on them too. It's like they're gonna be underpaid, overworked, and the only way that they're gonna stick it out is if they believe in you and your mission, right? And so it's imperative that the early team that you guys build around you, really buy into what you're trying to build.
And I think that leads into another question that we get quite a bit around here, which is getting that initial founding team together. And we recently had a speaker in who was talking about that he really preferred to just kind of go within his own network for the initial group and had never had good experience of just finding that outside random person. Has that been your experience as well?
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, because it's a marriage. I mean, you wouldn't want to marry a stranger. I mean, most oftentimes when you marry a stranger, it doesn't end well, right? It's like those random Vegas weddings, just they don't last very long oftentimes. Of course, every now and then it's like love at first sight and like you're happily ever married, but yeah. But I always tend to want to work with people that I know. In the early days especially, good friends that you've spent a lot of time with, that that you've already had arguments and you could work through arguments, because it gets hairy. I mean, there are so many times even at LegalZoom where Brian Liu and I we're still best friends. He was my best man, I was his best man, but there were some times where we almost like came to blows, like a lot of times, and if it wasn't for friendship, it probably wouldn't have worked.
Interesting. I mean, you've obviously had a lot of different things happen in your career, and if you had to look at it, from a professional standpoint at your life, what would you say was sort of, the high point and the low point? I know it's a tough question.
The high point and the low point of my entire career.
Yeah. Because I know if I say anything, then everyone always says getting married or their kid being born or those kinds of things. So
of my career. So I would say, I think the high point, I'm an eternal optimist. I just am. I think you kind of have to be if you're an entrepreneur. It's like if you're always thinking everything's going to fall apart, you're probably not an entrepreneur. But so for me, my high point is now. I love what I'm doing, and it doesn't feel like work, and I feel like we're doing something special with the company, and I'm surrounded by great people that I'm learning from every day. So that's the high point. My low point was ShoeDazzle. So, backstory is we ended up hiring an outside CEO for the company. I think too early, right? And that's another lesson that I've learned is, never give up the reins of your startup to an outsider unless it's ready, right? So LegalZoom, we hired a CEO like 8 or 9 years into it, and it was already pretty stable and going, and it was fine. But with ShoeDazzle, I really wanted to start the honest company, and so we hired an outside CEO who, honestly, he's a great guy, one of the smartest guys you'll ever meet. It just wasn't the right fit, and so he kind of changed the model. Well, the first thing he did was fire the entire team and bring in his own team. And it was disruptive at the time. And I think if ShoeDazzle was, well into it, years down the road, it would have been fine to hire, any CEO to kind of, steer the ship from there. But I think I left it too early, and it was just a very low point because there were days where I didn't think it was going to make it at all. Right. We basically kind of merged it off with a competitor, and that kind of saved it, truthfully. And so everything ended up fine. And now the company combined is profitable and growing, and so I still might make money from it because I've got shares in this company, but we'll see what happens. Yeah. But it was scary. I mean, when you build something that gets to a certain point and you think like, oh my God, are we going to be able to keep the lights on? It's scary.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I know you had a lot going on last summer, so it's yeah.
It was a tough summer. This summer is much better.
Right. We've got the Aloha hat on here, so
yeah,
so that's definitely improved things. Well, good. You know, so we touched on a little bit before, you know, but you do some angel investing, and you know, what are sort of the key characteristics for what you're looking for in an angel investment?
Yeah, I'm not sure if you knew that I started a fund.
Oh, okay. No, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
okay.
so we started a fund called the BAM Fund, BAM. And the reason we started that is because I was doing a lot of angel investing. And there was a point where I wasn't keeping track of any of them because I would just, you know, have all these angel investments, and I would have dinner with someone that would talk about some great company. I would actually think, like, did I invest in that? Right? Like, it got to that point, and I told this guy, Richard Jun, that I know, and so he kind of put structure around my angel investments, and now it's called the BAM Fund. And so we're investing out of that. But the number one thing that I look for is actually just one thing. Actually, no, 1.5 things, I guess. It's team, right? It's all about the people, especially at the startup stage. Because I've made the mistake, the classic mistake of falling in love with the idea. You know, because you see so many great ideas, right? And you know, but you know, a great idea is only a great idea if it's executed right. And the thing that I've learned over my years of investing is, you know, a strong, good, motivated team can always make a bad idea work. They'll figure out how to change it, how to pivot, how to do something to salvage what they have or to grow, you know, what they have. But a bad team, I mean, forget it.
And what would you be thinking about when you meet someone? Like, how do you make that gut call of whether you think they're a good team? Like, is it more of a gut kind of feeling for you, or you know, are you checking references? Is it, you know, the way they came to you, that kind of thing?
You know, I'd never check references. It's interesting that you asked that, because I know I probably should. Like, if
you wouldn't have any time.
I'm not sure if I've ever invested in anyone,
right
like,
now.
you know, that's been in jail or anything. I have no idea. But for me, it is mostly gut. But it's really kind of like, you know, the fire that the person has, right? Like, and they come in all types.
Right.
You know, there's a silent, deadly types. There's, like, you know, the fiery kind of like that, those types. But it all comes down to, like, you know, basically, like, are you willing to do anything it takes to make this work? You know, like, are you willing to do almost anything to make this work? Right. Because it's those types that usually succeed. Right? It's, you know, being an entrepreneur oftentimes I consider it being like a rat in a maze. You know, it's like you're going through this maze and you just keep going, and when your back's against the wall, you'll do anything. You know, and so it's I look for the types that are people that, you know, are truly passionate about what they're doing, because if you don't have that, then you're going to give up. Yep. Right? And I've invested in a lot of companies where they just give up, truthfully. It's like they hit a wall, they didn't raise money, so it's like, okay, I'm going to go work at eBay now, or, you know, whatever it is. It's like, okay, well, good luck to you. And I don't get upset about it. I just invested in the wrong team.
Right, right. Yeah, we had one of our former companies come back, and the CEO, his name's Mike Giroux, he had an app around cruises and ships. It's called ShipDate.
I remember that one.
Yeah, you're here for meet him. And so the company was acquired and worked out well, and he told us that he had answered 24,000 customer support emails personally. You know, and I just think that's not the kind of thing everyone would do. You know, like since he had started it, he had done that many, and it was great product feedback and that was sort of things. And he doesn't do all of it now, but I just thought that was like an amazing thing, you know, to put out there. You know, as something, because I think a lot of times it's, you know, obviously glorified now, and you know, I think people just think it's fairly simple, and I think things you were describing before of all the things you have to give up aren't always readily apparent to everyone. So. Yeah, but why don't we go ahead and we'll open it up to the audience here, see if anyone has some questions, and just go ahead and raise your hand. Yeah.
Hey, Brian.
Hi.
My name's Thomas. I'm a fellow UCLA law grad. Always good to see that lawyers succeed, especially in School of Public Affairs here. But, one question you see these studies upon studies that people who go to school and get MBAs and get JDs and whatever else, they fall into this rut of linear thinking. And despite the surveys that say that MBA students want to start businesses, they end up not starting businesses. What would be one thing that UCLA could do to create this disruptive thinking, or in my mind, this lateral thinking that says to someone, well, I'm working at Skadden Arps, I have a pretty good job, I may not be the best lawyer in the world, no offense, but I want to take advantage of this because this is a far better idea, and give up security for answering 24,000 customer mails. Like, what could UCLA do to generate that type of fire in students?
You know, it's a tough question because I don't think it's the school. Again, I think it's nature. It's your innate nature, right, to be a risk taker, and to look beyond, you know, the linear and the safety, the safe route of being a lawyer or whatever it is. And I just think some people will take that jump and others just won't. And it's like I see my son and my daughter, they're perfect examples. My son's 5, my daughter's 3, and they couldn't be more opposite. I mean, Davis, my 5-year-old son won't even jump into the water yet, right? I mean, he's just he's hesitant. And Madison, who's 3, is just, you can't control her. I mean, she's jumping everywhere. Like it's kind of like opposite. You would think the boy would be like what, but in our family, it's just opposite. It's just some people are born with that ability to say, you know what, I don't care about safety. I don't care about, you know, a steady income. I'm just going to go do this. And I'm not sure if a school could teach that, truthfully. I think they can encourage it by doing things like this. I think this is a great program for entrepreneurs to go out there and test whether or not they want to do what they want to do. And I think, you know, meetup groups are a good thing to encourage at the school level. I think there are a lot of great little entrepreneurial kind of meetups at school. I think all schools should kind of encourage that. I know some of the schools like Stanford and, you know, some of these other programs, they actually give funding to the students to start things up. I think that could be one way. It could also be, you know, I mean, I always thought it'd be a great idea to give funding to students to start things up and take equity in, you know, their startup and almost force them to give back to the school if they're successful. I mean, you know, I'm not sure how far that would actually go, but because I know there's a lot of rules and regulations around that. Yeah. But I'm not sure what more a school could really do outside of, you know, those things, because I think it's just in someone's nature to say, I'm going to go try something.
And I think also just having the financial wherewithal. You know, a lot of times I tell people, if, you know, you can't go 1 year without salary and just live on basically nothing, then you probably shouldn't be doing this, you know. So I think it's sort of making sure you're in that right position to go do something like that. And, you know, not everyone's in that position, you know, and obviously it gets harder and harder as you get more commitments in life, you know, downstream. So, yeah.
And that's absolutely true. I mean, I would have never started LegalZoom if I was married with kids. I would feel too much responsibility to do that. So,
yeah.
I wanted to ask you about LegalZoom, and when you started it, to what degree were you concerned that because what you were doing was so different, you would be exposing yourself to liability, and that ultimately the company could be brought down as a result of lawsuits and basically, you know, the whole legal world, you know, attacking you?
Oh, but they did attack us, and they still attack us today. We've now had litigation with over 20 ABA or 20 bar associations, and we've won every single one. Because what we're doing is legal, right? You have the right to represent yourself, right? You have the right to use TurboTax to do your own taxes, right? It's a software program, really. And so, you know, at the end of the day, we win. So I always knew that, and so we didn't have a lot of fear when it came to that. In terms of, you know, creating a document like a will or something that was screwed up and you know, somebody sues us because they lost everything to probate or whatever it is, that doesn't really concern me either. We'll put it this way. As an entrepreneur, there's not a lot of things that concern me. Does that make sense? It's like, for me, it's like, you're gonna get hit left and right with all sorts of problems in any business you do. You just keep going, right? So that never hindered me, you know, and to this day, it doesn't bother me. Did that answer your question? It's just, it never bothered me. Yeah.
Start over here.
So, given that you sort of got the genesis for your idea when you were working at the law firm, do you think it's important to sort of get some exposure to the working world to find an idea that you think will work, or do you think that it's okay to start directly out of school and go ahead and try to start something?
I think it's okay to start something anytime you want to start something. And I don't think you even have to go to school to do that. I don't want to tell my son that, truthfully. I want him to graduate. But really, if the time is right, because a lot of it's timing too. You know, a lot of it's timing. I actually think, you know, LegalZoom was the right time, because I remember the first time I even saw the internet. It was so exciting. This was back in when was this? Gosh, in 1993-ish, 1994-ish, when they had an internet terminal at the library on school. And someone said, "Hey, have you seen the internet?" And I said, "No, what is that?" And they're like, "You got to see this. Let's go over to the library and I'll show this to you." And the first site I ever went to was a Russian mail order bride site, right? And it, like, the pictures of these Russian women came up, and it was like, you know, meet this woman and this. I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. Like where is this information coming from? And he was explaining, like, you know, you got servers in Russia that are probably putting it into this. I was like, wow. Honestly, it's like I still get shivers from that, because I just knew that was going to change everything. Right? Just instantaneous information from anywhere around the world at your fingertips. It's just, for me, it was like this revelation. And I remember I thought, wow, I should be doing something with this internet thing, right? And doing something there. But I was in law school, and you know, this is a little cultural too, by the way, because being Korean and getting into law school and going to law, having your parents pay for it and then telling them you're going to quit was just not an option for me, right? And so I ended up doing the law school thing and graduating, and then the other thing is the peer pressure too, right? So everyone in my class, they were getting jobs at all these law firms, and you don't want to be the only guy saying, "Oh, I'm not gonna do that either," and you know, it was a lot of things. But looking back on it now, I probably should have never gone to law school. You know, I probably should have started something sooner. That's how I see it. But you know, it is what it is. I can't complain. But yeah, I think any time is the right time. And even if you're in high school, I mean, I met this high school entrepreneur group recently, and some of these kids were just awesome. You know, they're like, you know, hacking away and coding and building apps and this and that. It was amazing. So I think it's anytime you feel ready is the right time.
All right.
Brian, such a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You've already kind of touched upon it. My question is time, is priorities. How do you place your marbles on your left or right or up or down? Especially when you have a full-time job, you already know you already want to start a company. There's only so much time in this world. How do you find you know, the right steps?
Well, now my life is a lot more balanced, truthfully, because number one, it is easier to raise capital, but also build teams. But with LegalZoom, there was no balance. I'll be totally honest with you. It was work. It was 100% work. I mean, there was a time where I wouldn't leave the condo for like months, like 2-3 months of just almost not leaving. And that's really what it took. I mean, it just
Were
like—
you married at that point in time?
No, of course not. No one would date me. But yeah, I'll tell you, there's no balance in startup life. If you're looking for balance and trying to find time to do other things, there's just not. There's just not. I'm sorry, he was raising his hand.
Wondering what are some of the bigger picture opportunities or trends on the internet or tech that interest you now? If you let's say you started a fourth company, I mean, where do you see opportunity right now?
Yeah, oh, that's a great question.
Yeah.
I see a ton of opportunities still. I think we're at the earliest stages of what's possible. It's fascinating that you see like these macro trends in technology, right? And you see that most of these macro trends last, call it 20 years, right? And that starts from the earliest of technologies. It's like you see it start and it kind of escalates, and the wealth creation especially usually happens in the last 5 years of that technology, right? And so what you see from all the way from mainframes to the PC to the internet to now mobile, it's, right now we're kind of at this curve where, the wealth creation will happen within the next probably 5-6 years, like massive wealth creation in these technologies. But I see a lot of great, platform businesses that are being launched, e-commerce companies. I see a lot of move to granularity that looks really interesting. Like I'll give you a perfect example of that. I'm starting to invest a lot into companies that are looking at kind of like a granular view on consumer generated content and user reviews. So like, for example, like The Sweetest is a company I just invested in, because there's a lot of sites out there that do reviews on hotels and stuff, but they actually take it down to the room level, right? Like, these are the best rooms at this hotel, right? If you're checking in, ask for these rooms. And somebody did that earlier with a company for airplane seats called Seat Guru.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you remember that one, but they sold too early, by the way.
Yeah.
But there's another one out there called Fuzi that I like. That's very granular in the sense that you have a lot of review sites out there for restaurants, right? You got Yelp, you got all the Zagat, TripAdvisor, you got all these restaurant reviews. But the problem for me has always been going to the restaurant that everyone says is great and then not knowing what to order, right? So they're doing reviews down to the actual dish level, right? I think there's going to be a lot more of that. I think e-commerce is exciting because you're going to see a massive amount of brands launched online, right, with vertical integration, because it really is tough to compete against Amazon, right? If you're coming to me with an idea saying, hey, we're just going to out Amazon, I'm just like, good luck. You're not going to be able to, right? That game's done, it's over. But the way that you can kind of compete is by having your own brand, right, and having your own destination where that's the only place online you can buy it. And I think you're going to see a lot more of that, a lot more of the honest companies, the Warby Parkers, the Bonoboses, vertically integrated brands that are launching online. I still think there's a lot of room to grow there. I mean, I've seen a lot of companies starting with that kind of model.
Yeah, so if you look at Silicon Valley, sort of like the diaspora for entrepreneurship in the United States and sort of the influence it's had on the growth in Silicon Beach, Austin, New York, all across America. And then at the same time, looking at companies like The Honest Company, which is very much so a socially responsible company, and sort of the spread of companies like Enru and just kind of these social focused companies. What effect do you see those having on a lot of the policy issues this kind of country's having at the moment?
You do see a lot more of this happening. It's interesting. We just hired Heather Podesta, and I'm not sure, most of you probably wouldn't know her, but she's like one of the top lobbyists in government. And we just hired her because The Honest Company is, well, number one, we're growing quickly, but number two, in order to be a large company nowadays, you got to get in front of policies and laws. And we know that there's going to be a lot of regulation involved with the term organic, even the term natural, and what does that mean, and are these government, are the congressmen and senators going to understand what we stand for, and you just try to get ahead of that curve. So I think a lot of, I know Uber is having a lot of issues right now, right, in terms of some legal policies around the unions and taxi drivers and this and that, and it's really the responsibility of the entrepreneur to just get ahead of it, truthfully. Make sure that government understands your position and get as many of them in on your side as possible early on.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, I know you've worked with Robert Shapiro, Jessica Alba. I was just curious, how do you see the celebrity role playing within the creation of the brand and aligning yourself with, or aligning your brand with an influencer?
It's always worked for me. And it worked early on with Robert Shapiro because we saw, how much traction he got for the company. Like he could get himself onto the Today Show or, Good Morning America and talk about LegalZoom, and we would see the orders come in, right? So, and we didn't have to really pay for that per se. I mean, we gave him some equity to be one of the founders, but, and I just saw that it worked. And so when I started ShoeDazzle with Kim Kardashian, I just knew it worked. So when we came with ShoeDazzle, Mira and I were like, looking at this list of names and trying to figure out who we could work with. And she actually, my wife, who's really into pop culture, said Kim Kardashian, right? And this is after the first season of Keeping Up. So this is early. This is before Kim really became who she is today. And Mira says, she's got great fashion. She'll get it onto any talk show and this and that. So we worked with Kim, and sure enough, same thing. It's like she would go onto these talk shows and flood of orders and members. And so I knew that would work with The Honest Company as well with Jessica Alba. And I actually think that's one of the advantages we have being in LA.
For sure.
I mean, entertainment is just part of the city, and it's something that we could all work with and be part of as well in that sense. And all these influencers want something. I mean, they all want to be part of a really cool startup. It's just a matter of getting in front of them and sharing the story with them and convincing them to join you.
Yeah.
Given that you've scaled a few companies now, what is your strategy for expanding into new markets, specifically for Honest? And secondly, how do you kind of hold on to that brand equity that Honest has of being kind of this organic, natural product when you're expanding into new markets?
So new markets, do you mean globally? Internationally. So we're just starting to think about that now with The Honest Company. And we just took a trip to Australia like 2 months ago. And we want to launch Australia first. And the reason for that is because Australians are very similar in lifestyle and culture to Californians. And we know the product is adopted pretty strongly here. That's number one. But number two, are there any Australians in the room? Okay, so I'll just say, so the reason we chose Australia is because it's far enough away and small enough that if we screw it up, it's okay. And that really was our decision. We're like, okay, if we launch it and it doesn't work, then we'll just kind of bury it under the rug. And you can't do that with the UK or EU or even China, especially China. It's like, if you mess those countries up, you can't relaunch, right? So we'll take our learnings from Australia, especially on logistics and supply chain, and then kind of leverage that into other countries. That's the initial plan. But in terms of building that brand, it'll be really similar to the way we're doing it here. I mean, it's nice that you say The Honest Company brand, because right now it's like we have internal discussions with this all the time. We're not a brand yet. We're a products company. We'd love to build a brand, and we're trying to. We've got the foundation to build a great brand. But today we're a product company that sells non-toxic, bad chemical-free goods. Because brand is a very unique thing. It's like when you look at the greatest brands in the world, the Nikes, the Apples, the Coca-Colas, they go so far beyond product, right? When you open that bottle of Coca-Cola, you're opening up happiness. When you're using Apple, you're unique, you're different, you're cutting edge, right? It's like it goes beyond the product. Nike, I remember when Nike sponsored Lance Armstrong, right? And it was just this commercial, Lance Armstrong just booking down this road in France. And then it was just that, no music, nothing, just him biking. And then at the end, it was just the swoosh, and it said, just do it, right? And you're like, yeah, just do it, right? And then you realize, wait, Nike doesn't even sell bicycle stuff. That's why it's like that's a brand, right? It's like, how do you build that? That's what we're doing at Honest. It's like, how do we get to that point where everyone just innately understands that it just resonates with them right away? I'm doing good. I'm being good to the future. I'm being good to my children by using these products. And that's, that's what we're trying to build.
So you've had a few obviously successful companies, and sort of in the entrepreneurship community, you hear so often about companies failing and the failure rate. So having the success that you've had, how do you do it? I mean, have you had any failures? I mean, just honestly, like, how do you do it? After having one, how do you know that the next is gonna? It seems like it keeps going for you, and how do you do it?
It's hard. And you learn a lot through your mistakes. I mean, I've been really fortunate in that I've never made a gigantic mistake that would devastate the company and turn the lights off. We almost did with ShoeDazzle, of course, but it's you just learn as you go. I've had failures. I invested in and started a frozen yogurt company called Cantaloupe, and it's still there. It's on Hollywood and La Brea if you all want to check it out.
You haven't given up yet on it, huh?
No, I actually sold it for a massive loss. I built, because what happened was LegalZoom was in that corner of this building, and I fell in love with Pinkberry.
Yeah.
Right, I just love the taste, and I would get these cravings for Pinkberry. So I would call up, and I knew the owners, and I would call them up and say, hey, you got to put a Pinkberry in this, like right across from me, because there's a space, and they said no. I was like, okay, fine, I'm just going to build one myself. And so I built this Cantaloupe location, and I would just eat. I was the only customer. I would go down there and I would eat all my own yogurt. But yeah, that was a miserable failure, and that's actually when I realized, like, I should not be doing things I don't really understand. It's tough, and I don't understand retail, like locations. There's a couple of things I'll never do again. Retail. Here are 3 things I'll never invest in. If you come to me with any sort of food concept retail idea, right? I've lost too much money in restaurants, right? And that's a tough business. The second one are movies. I've lost money in movies, so I'll never invest in a movie again. And I'll never invest in fashion. And I know some of you are doing fashion, but I just can't do it because it's really, really hard. It's like, it's like more power, seriously, to the Giorgio Armanis and the Marciellos of the world. These guys are geniuses, man. It's like, to build a brand like that, it's like, and to get that kind of volume, like Ralph Lauren or someone, it's like, that's rarer than LeBron James, It's like that's incredible, because you just got to be so on top of it and so passionate about it. It's like, for me, it's like, I'm just not that passionate about it. As you can tell, I'm not that fashionable. But the thing is, my wife picked my socks.
I like those socks. I was going to say those are fashionable.
But it's just it's a tough business. I mean, you're going out there, you're buying all this, you're making these big bets in inventory, right? Hoping it sells, hoping you're on the market. If it doesn't sell, you discount. And it's a tough way to make a buck.
Well, going back on the last question and sort of, the idea of your background and how you're perceived, what do you think is the biggest misconception about you?
About me?
Yeah. I know.
Misconception? I don't even know what the conception is.
Yeah. Okay. Well, no, it's not.
Have you heard it?
We'll save that for when the cameras are off, So no, fair enough. I mean, if there's nothing that jumps to mind, so but
misconceptions.
Yeah.
No.
No? All right. That's okay. You don't have to answer every question, All right, let's take another one from the audience. Yeah.
Specifically for subscription-based commerce sites, when you hit early growth periods and it kind of plateaus, did you find most success in diversifying products or reducing churn, or what was your best way of sustaining early revenue growth?
That's a really good question. It's of course all the above. but subscription models are interesting because I'm not sure if are you involved in one or
Yeah.
thinking of starting one? Yeah. So are you familiar with the Wharton model of subscriptions?
No.
You should look that up and study it. It's from the Wharton School, and they studied a bunch of successful subscription companies, and they kind of show you what the elasticity curve of what a good subscription business should look like. And it's interesting. It's you can diversify into more products and more choices to keep that LTV, that lifetime value, longer. But then you look at companies like Proactive that didn't really have to diversify, right? So it's for Proactive, it was just a very strong product and brand. It actually worked for acne, for a lot of problems that people are having with their skin, and that's why the subscription worked for them. But if you're dealing with a subscription where you see the churn rates just like, climbing on you, then maybe it is a product. And so I would focus on that. What we did with the Honest Company is that we have, two basic kind of subscription bundles. One is for diapers and wipes. And that's kind of a pretty sticky one because, you're not going to go a month without putting diapers on your kid. At least I hope you don't. And then on the essential side, it's kind of like household cleaning items and baby products. And we've noticed that the more products that we put in there, the longer their LTV gets, because it gives the user choice every month to swap in and out of products and to keep that subscription going.
I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions. Yeah?
Do you think LA has sort of arrived? I guess you've been starting companies here for a while, but what's your sense? Is like something special happening now, or is it about to happen, as opposed to maybe, let's say, the Valley?
Well, we're never going to be the Valley. I should never say never, but we just don't have the ancestry that they do, right? I mean, the technology revolution did not start in Los Angeles, right? It started up north. And when you have companies like the old Hewlett-Packards and the Apples and then Yahoo and eBay and Google, YouTube, I mean, these all started up in the Valley. And what happens with that kind of ecosystem is, number one, it attracts capital, but number two, a lot of talent that spawn off and start other great companies, right? And Los Angeles is at its infant stages still. We don't have, number one, we don't have that Google, right? We don't have that, Facebook, right? And we just don't have that in Los Angeles, which means that we don't have the talent in Los Angeles, as much talent, right? Which means that we don't have capital either, right? It's kind of like this cycle. I mean, you need capital to attract talent. You need talented companies to attract capital. And I think we're definitely years ahead of where we were, just a couple years ago. Yeah. I mean, it's getting there, right? I mean, we're starting to see more funds kind of come down here. We see, like Mark Suster up front raising a good round of capital. It's it's getting there, but we're tiny compared to what's available in the Valley to this point. I mean, that's what I see. I mean, you can still build a great company down here. Don't get me wrong. There's still great, talented people here. It's just it pales in comparison to what's up there. But then again, I think it's easier to start one down here too, because you got an employee base that's much more loyal as well, because there just aren't as many choices of where to jump ship. I mean, up in the Valley, it's all about compensation for these guys and stock options, and to compete against Google and Facebook, it's tough, right? But we could do that down here because it's just not as competitive still.
Mm-hmm. So I guess for the final question here, you've obviously made a lot of great progress on multiple companies, and I know the Honest Company is set up really nicely right now. So where do you kind of see yourself, maybe in 15, 20 years from now, if you had to look into the future?
If I had to look into the future, well, I could see myself doing the Honest Company for a while, for at least a good 10 years, and then just retiring after that. I told my wife I wouldn't start anything else again, because it's like they're like dog years. I mean, seriously, like I just don't have it in me either to go out and really start one up again. but in 15 years, I'd love to, you know, look back at my career and be satisfied. And 2 is spend more time with the family. And I actually told Dean Moran at the law school that I would teach there. So I'm thinking maybe I'll teach or do something like that. But I think I will always do something. I'm not the type that would just sit on a beach, even though my hat says aloha. But I'm not the type that just wants to sit on a beach for the rest of my life. I would get bored. So I would always want to do something. But I'm just not sure what that something is yet.
Fair enough. Yeah. No, that's great. Well, thank you so much for your time, Brian.
Thank you.